combustion engine, the internal combustion engine. It's the end of transmission lines for electricity, because the energy that these spaceships are using, what people call UFOs, we don't call them, no one in the business calls them UFOs. They are not unidentified and they don't fly. Yeah, we'll get to this. But these objects are extracting energy from the fabric of space, okay, around, not outer space, but the fabric of space. And in fact, even the early Lockheed and Northrop experimental spaceships that we have built, and we're talking 1950s and 60s, were called flux liners because they were pulling energy from the quantum flux field, what's called the quantum flux field that's in the space in this room. And every cubic centimeter of space, for example, in this room has enough energy to run the Earth for a day. It's a huge amount of energy. And so once this was really figured out by the mid-50s, long time ago, 50 years ago, they knew that this would be the end of the oil cartels and the international financial petrodollar system, and a huge amount of the industrialists would then have to change their whole way of operating. Because think about it. What happens when every village in India or sub-Saharan Africa can have a device that looks like a generator, and it's extracting energy from this quantum flux field? Suddenly, you have an economic growth all over the world. And this is a wonderful thing. It would be the end of poverty. But it would also be the end of the economic hegemony, where Europe and America, with 600 million people, dominate the whole global economy of 6 billion. So this is a huge geopolitical problem. And so the issue isn't about just money, it's about power. Who has the power? How the Earth is run? Who is running Earth? And then you have another issue, and that is there are people who view the world as they understand it. And in America we have a saying, if you wear rose-colored glasses, you see everything in the world is rose-colored. But if you're wearing glasses that are conflict-colored, colored with a sort of paranoid and militaristic view of the world, you're going to view these visitors as a threat, and you're going to respond to them as a threat, even though there's no evidence that they're a threat. I want to be very clear on this. There's no objective evidence that anyone has been harmed by these visitors, and there's certainly no evidence that they're a threat to us. There's a lot of evidence, however, that they're concerned about our threat to the peace and the order of space. Why? Because our technological capabilities and our weapons have surpassed our social and spiritual development, clearly. And we are at that stage in the evolution of a global civilization where our science and technology has gotten way out there, but our social and spiritual is lagging. And this is that danger zone. And Earth is in this danger zone now. And they know this. These visitors from other civilizations, other planets, know this. So, unfortunately, I think that they have had a great concern about our nuclear facilities. We know this. We have colonels and lieutenant colonels who are Strategic Air Command and the Atomic Energy Commission who have testified at disclosureproject.org that every single one of our nuclear weapons storage areas have been visited by these ET spacecraft because they were obviously concerned. And in the Soviet Union also, in Russia. We have spoken to people with the KGB and with their space command. And so it's clear that they have that concern, but that doesn't mean that they're hostile towards Earth. I think they're concerned about human hostility. And I think, however, this has gotten misinterpreted because here's the risk. In the vacuum of secrecy, when you have this vacuum of secrecy, it's very easy to begin to believe your own worldview, and there's no one telling you differently. This is the danger of a program being hermetically sealed and kept this secret, because they do not get the perspective and it's gotten out of control. And Eisenhower said when he left office in 1961, beware the military-industrial complex, because it can become a threat to our security, our way of life, and our democratic institutions. And he was a five-star general and a conservative Republican, but he was very concerned. And why? We have people who worked with him in the White House at that time who have told us, who are witnesses for our group, that he had been stabbed in the back by people who wanted to keep this secret and actually trumped or violated his presidential power and took these projects and hid them deeper and deeper and deeper. This is a very dangerous thing in a world where you're dealing with technologies this powerful. And this was, of course, President Clinton's frustration. President Clinton asked Webster Hubbell, who was third in command at Justice, to look into two things. And this is in his book, Webster Hubbell's book, Friends in High Places. Clinton wanted him to find out about what are these UFOs, and, you know, well, who's keeping it secret and why, and who killed Jack Kennedy, because Jack Kennedy was his hero. Well, we discovered there was a connection. But, and his CIA director, R. James Woolsey, was equally worried, because when I met personally with Woolsey here in the Washington area in December of 1993, he was very gravely shaken by the fact that there was a secret cabal or a whole level of government and corporate activity dealing with this issue that was lying to him as the CIA director and as also to the president. So this is a very serious problem, and so the secrecy is related to a number of related issues. One is this inertia that happens when you have this large ongoing historical problem of secrecy. The other is certain orthodoxies of both religion and science that people don't want out. Because obviously, if you own a trillion-dollar oil field, or a company that's assets are in that range, remember, this is not particularly good news for you. It's good news for humanity and for the earth and for the environment. But there's only a few hundred people in corporations who really control the world economy. And this information would change forever their grip on that power. Now, they would still have a lot of money, but it's not about money. You and I think of money, can I afford to put my son or daughter to college, or buy a home, or what have you. They're viewing it as power, the geopolitical control. So it's a power issue. And this would change geopolitics forever. A very good question. How is control on the issue exerted? And it's through a number of means. First of all, through just pure corruption and intimidation. You should not underestimate the reach of folks who want to keep this secret, their ability to pay for people in the media to kill stories or change them or ridicule them, the ability to corrupt people in certain financial and governmental positions. And I've seen it happen, personally seen it happen. I've been approached by the former head of Army intelligence and by his minions to be bought off, to not tell the truth about this. And I told him, go away. But most people would not say go away. And particularly when it's attended by threats. And so the power of ridicule, the power of threats, and the power of inducements, position, money, what have you. But I think most importantly is psychological. It's a psychological phenomenon. Because if you create enough false information, what's known as disinformation, that makes the subject seem ridiculous or frightening, people don't want to hear about it. And it closes doors automatically. And since there is no large-scale institutional support or funding or professional effort on this issue, but before what we had done, there was nothing. There was hobbyists and volunteer organizations and what have you. It's very easy to do this because you can control the worldview on it by creating videotapes and movies and books that either frighten people and turns them off, or makes it seem so ridiculous that they dismiss it as nonsense. And that is psychological warfare planning. And we have a document from 1953 from the CIA where they specifically talk about this, and this is in our books, where they specifically talk about the psychological warfare value of the UFO subject. Okay, so this has been over 50-some years of psychological warfare conditioning. I have a family member who was the city editor of the Boston Globe, a very prestigious newspaper in the United States. And she told me that even if we put an extraterrestrial body on her desk, she would not run a story about it in the Boston Globe because the subject has been the object of so much tabloid nonsense that it would be disreputable for them to talk about it. So a lot of the mainstream media won't touch the subject. They won't touch it, no matter how much positive evidence you give them. That has not changed much in 50 or 60 years. Occasionally it makes its way. And then the other issue is this. One of the big misperceptions, it's a very serious misperception, is that the big media is free in the West. It isn't. In fact, Pravda and the Chinese news agency have more accurately portrayed what we're doing than the Washington Post or the New York Times or ABC News in the United States. The reason for this, and as I understand it, it can be traced back to a number of documents, one of which is a fairly recent one from 1991. And if you go to disclosureproject.org, you'll see I wrote a paper called Media Play, and it's linked to a CIA document that got accidentally declassified, and I understand was later reclassified. And on page 6 of that document, it talks about the fact that the intelligence community has at every major wire service, news magazine, and television network, not just the United States, but around the world, agents embedded in those media to kill, alter, change stories as needed. Well, you know, the public out there is very naive about thinking that we have a free and unfettered press. We do on small issues, but on these sort of big issues, it's very controlled. And I tell people they should read a book called Into the Buzzsaw that Gore Vidal wrote the foreword for, that talks about mainstream journalists who's discovered very hot issues, not this issue necessarily, but how they were cut down and went into this buzzsaw of being completely eliminated from being able to tell the story to the people, not just in America, but around the world. So once you get into the large corporate international media, they're plugged into the international corporate finance and international interest. And I am very skeptical that they're really that free. And the reason I say this is that I've seen it firsthand. I had an executive producer at ABC News in New York who wanted to do a huge expose using Disclosure Project military witnesses. And he was all ready to do this. And he controlled major news magazines like 2020 and Primetime Live. And when it came time for him to go into production, he called me, he said, "Dr. Greer, I can't make this." I said, "Why not?" He says, "They won't let me." I said, "Who are they?" He said, "Dr. Greer, you know who they are." It's a very shadowy, powerful, and by the way, it's not U.S., it's transnational. Big mistake people make about this. They think that, oh, well, it's American or it's British. It isn't. Forget all the national boundaries and visualize a permanent international geopolitical entity that wants to keep these sort of things secret because of the interlocking financial and economic interests. That's what we're talking about. It isn't as simple as saying it's the U.S. government. Most of the people in the U.S. government, I would say, and this is what shocks people, our biggest supporters have been people at the Pentagon who have been lied to about these projects and are furious and know that there is a shadowy, illegal, rogue group that is running this. And in fact, even at the Congress, when I was meeting with senior counsel for the Senate Appropriations Committee 13 years ago, in 1994, they told me that there was somewhere upwards of $100 billion US a year being siphoned out from various agencies into these super secret projects, and they had no control over it. And this man who had a top secret clearance and subpoena power